Good morning and welcome to Dorset Council's Licensing Subcommittee. Could I have a proposer for chairman for the Licensing Committee, please?
As chair, I propose Councillor Emma Parker.
And I will second that.
Thank you, councillors. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Sarah Williams and Paul Harrison, substituted by Councillors John Andrews and Susan Cocking.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Do we have any urgent items? Okay, what I'll do now, I'll get everybody to introduce themselves, and once we've all done that, then I will go to the licensing officer to outline the report. My name's Councillor Emma Parker, and I will be chairing this subcommittee today. And my fellow councillors?
I'm Councillor Susan Cocking from Portland Ward.
And I'm Councillor John Andrews from Sherborne East Ward.
Democratic Services?
Morning, I'm Elaine Tibble from Democratic Services.
Hello, I'm Megan Rochester, also from Democratic Services.
And our legal?
I'm Phil Crowther, I'm the subcommittee's legal advisor.
Thank you, and I will now move to our senior licensing officer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually the licensing team leader. I'm Aileen Powell, and I'm presenting this report on behalf of Catherine, who wrote it.
I'll move on to the applicants. There is a button on the right-hand side of your microphone. It will go red when you speak. Once you've spoken, you can switch it off because then the other person can't cut in with it. You get there, believe me. Okay, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Georgia. I'm events manager at Dean's Court.
And I'm Jonathan. I'm the operations manager for Dean's Court.
Okay, and the people that have made representation, if I go down through my list and if you can press your button and just introduce yourself, because then that's easier, because then I know where you are and I can stick to the list that I have in front of me. Okay, I've got Mr. Dovey.
Hello, I'm Geoffrey. I'm from Millstream Close, and I've been living in Wimborne for 27 years in the same location.
Thank you very much. I've got Julia Herbert.
Hello, Julia Herbert, also from Millstream Close.
Thank you. And I've got Stephen and Catherine Hughes.
Yes, Stephen and Catherine Hughes from Grammar School Lane.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jane Nichol.
Hi, Jane Nichol from Queen Elizabeth Court.
Thank you. Kate Randall.
Morning, Kate Randall from Queen Elizabeth Court also.
And Scott Randall.
Hi, yes, Scott from Queen Elizabeth Court.
And I've got Mr. Nichol, who is speaking on behalf of a Monica Strachan.
Hi, I'm Ken Nichol from Queen Elizabeth Court.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for attending this morning. Okay, I will now move on to the report. Aileen, could you outline the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a new premises licence that's going to be in place of the existing licence that's already at this premises. There is a fairly complex licence in place on the premises, a copy of which is in the report. The application is to allow music on the premises from 8 o'clock in the morning to midnight, with late night refreshment and alcohol going on for a further 30 minutes. The premises opening times will be from 8 a.m. to 01:30 every day. The application comes after a meeting with officers from licensing, the police and environmental health with the applicant. The police have requested conditions relating to the provision of security, underage sales checks and the provision of an incident book to be added to any licence if it were to be granted. Whilst the application is for an additional hour, the restrictions of the existing licence mean that a number of temporary event notices are traditionally served every year. It can be preferable to have licensing hours to cover the whole lot, because then all the conditions that are on your licence cover any temporary extension. Whereas if you have temporary event notices, they could operate without those premises licences. There have been 9 objections to this application from nearby residents and one representation in support of the application. The objections mainly focus on the extra hour of disturbance from longer licensable hours, which is definitely a relevant matter. However, representations relating to wildlife are not relevant, as it does not relate to one of the 4 licensing objectives, and these should be disregarded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Aileen at this stage?
Yeah, I've got one. Aileen, could you tell us, with the TENS events, were most of those at weekends that they were applied for? I don't know if you've got that information in front of you. I know they have had TENS events, but I just didn't wonder if they were Friday and Saturdays.
I think you better address that to the applicant rather than me. I can find it out, but it might take me a little while.
I have one question. It's regarding the current licence. Obviously, there's conditions that have been added on from a subcommittee. Was that a subcommittee at the time? Was the original application have representations which made the subcommittee, or has the actual licence been called in?
Thank you, Chair. The licence, the original licence was actually done in 2010, and it looks like the conditions were put on then from the operating schedule. I would imagine it was probably negotiated with the police and environmental health and the fire, because there are a load of conditions you can see. And then there was conditions 79 to 82, which were added by the licensing committee at that time.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Aileen with regards to the report? No? Okay. Do any of the people that made representation, do you have any questions for Aileen at this stage with regards to the report? Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair. I would like to inquire about the monitoring of the conditions, if that's an applicable question at this time, that are currently in place for the existing licence.
Thank you, Chair. We tend to monitor conditions on a risk basis. So if we get loads of complaints in about a premises, then obviously we will go and look at those premises really carefully. What we've got is we've got over 1,500 premises licences throughout the district. It would be totally impossible for us to go to every single one every single night. But if we get complaints, then yes, we will go out and see.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Not entirely. I would just like to expand on that, as the current conditions of Articles 42 and 43 on the licence explicitly state that a noise plan with an experienced acoustic technician shall be submitted for events with specific decibel level readings taken. I'm just wondering if that has ever happened.
Thank you, Chair. That would have been a condition applied, requested by Environmental Health, and any recording or any monitoring of that would have to be done with an Environmental Health officer.
It's environmental health that to have anything to do with regards to noise. So if a noise management plan is to be offered up prior to an event, it would go to environmental protection. It would be down to them to liaise with the applicant as to what they would need to do and if the document is satisfactory. Thank you. Okay, I will now move on to the applicants. If you would like to outline your report, please.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. So, hello. Just to introduce ourselves, first of all, my name's Jonathan. I'm the operations manager for Deans Court. I've been part of the Deans Court team since 2010. In fact, one of my earliest tasks was actually dealing with the original license hearing back in 2010, 2011. During my time serving as events manager, I was personally responsible for overseeing every single wedding hosted at Dean's Court, from the planning stages through to the day itself. With the exception of perhaps 5, I have attended every wedding, witnessing several hundred joyous celebrations during my time. And I believe that those to my left who have encountered me in the past would agree that I've always been accessible, attentive, and receptive to their feedback. I now work more behind the scenes while my colleague Georgia takes the reins.
Hello, so my name is Georgia and I've been part of the Dean's Court team since 2014. I started as a member of the waitstaff team and over time I progressed to a supervisor role. In fact, I've had the privilege of covering the weddings that Jonathan couldn't oversee personally, ensuring that in his absence those events ran smoothly and met our high standards. This year I took on the role of events manager, which of course means I am involved in every aspect of the weddings that we host. I have personally overseen and attended each wedding we have held so far this year, and I am committed to continuing this practice for the remainder. And I mention this because I think it demonstrates a level of dedication and engagement that Jonathan and I bring to our roles. We believe it's essential to be hands-on during each event rather than simply leaving it to a weekend team or casual workers. We take pride in being at the helm on the big day, ensuring that everything goes according to plan. And when things may falter, as Jonathan mentioned, we are always available and approachable. I know some to our left have needed to call us, and I'm sure they would attest that we are readily accessible at any time of the day or night.
So thank you for taking the time to review our application and to hear our perspective today. We appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an understanding of our business, the nature of our operations, and our commitment to responsible venue management, as well as explain why we are applying for a new license and address some of the objections raised in the letters of representation. If I could first clarify the history and context of our venue. Since 2011, Dean's Court has held a premises license, which has allowed us to host various events, with weddings being our primary focus. However, the particulars of our current license were born against the backdrop of significant misunderstandings that arose following another event known as Party in the Paddock, which takes place on our land during the same weekend as the Wimborne Folk Festival. Party in the Paddock caters to around 3,000 predominantly young attendees, featuring loud music, often tribute rock bands, with a substantial bar, essentially operating as a pop-up music festival. And it's essential to stress that this event is organized entirely separately from Dean's Court and is not something that we plan to replicate or host throughout the year ourselves. Nevertheless, when we applied for our license in 2011, this confusion led to around 40 objection letters from local residents expressing concerns based on this misunderstanding. As a result of this confusion and the opposition faced, our original license became burdened with an intricate set of conditions, some of which were contradictory, illogical, and even unenforceable. Recognizing the need for a fresh start without these cumbersome conditions, earlier this year, we were approached and subsequently held a meeting with representatives from licensing, the police, fire, and the environmental health authorities at Dean's Court. Based on their advice, we decided to pursue a new license that allows us to operate without the complications of the past. We are immensely grateful for the time and expertise of the various responsible authorities, and it was reassuring to know that, in their professional capacity as experts in noise control and crime prevention, they found no objections to the application that we have submitted. To address the reasons behind the additional hours being added to the license, we want to clarify that whenever we needed to extend our normal operating times in the past and go on beyond 11 o'clock up until midnight, we have done so through the use of temporary event notices. These temporary extensions have been successfully managed for many years and have proven to be an effective solution when required. This led us to consider the possibility of incorporating a midnight finish into our license, reducing the need for individual temporary event notices for such extensions. However, it is essential to stress that our intention is not to change our primary business model. Our regular operating hours and offering will remain the same, with weddings and private events as our main focus. The midnight finish is not something that we seek to use every night. It is merely sought so as to make that option for those couples who may desire a slightly later finishing time to confirm it to them sooner. But we will speak more on this shortly. So to sum up so far, the primary reason that we are applying for a new license is to reduce the complexities of our current license, and by incorporating the possibility of extended hours directly into our premise license, we aim to be more transparent and regulated in our operations, eliminate the need for individual temporary event notices for each extension. And this ensures a clearer and more accountable approach to our closing times. So for the benefit of those unaware, I'd like to provide some background on our events and hospitality business. Deans Court has been hosting weddings since 2011, marking over a decade of experience and establishment in the industry. Throughout this time, our interactions with the licensing authority have consistently demonstrated that we have no history of substantiated or pursued complaints against our venue. Of course, we are always open to being fact-checked, and I welcome licensing to correct me if I have any misunderstandings on that part. Our commitment to responsible and respectful operations has been a cornerstone of our business, and we take pride in our positive relationship with the authorities and the community. We are primarily a wedding venue, with all guests in attendance invited by the bride and groom. We do not host evening events where the general public have access to our venue, and certainly in our marquee, which is the only area with a bar, stage, and dance floor, we operate solely when there is a pre-booked wedding or private event taking place. In addition to weddings in our marquee, we occasionally host other private events such as school proms, birthday parties, and anniversary celebrations. It's important to note that we have not for many years, nor do we have any plans to, open any marquee-based evening event to the general public. Our business model does not involve organizing events where tickets are sold or allowing unknown individuals to simply show up. This is not a direction we wish to pursue in any capacity. Our application also covers our cafe and the main mansion house, where similarly we do not intend to host any open-to-all evening events. The inclusion of the cafe in this application is to allow us to continue to accommodate private parties and occasions as we do currently under our existing license. Typically, given the atmosphere of the cafe, these gatherings involve a few glasses of Prosecco with perhaps 20 or 30 friends. Of course, the license also allows our daytime customers to enjoy a glass of rosé wine with a quiche and salad for lunch. But it's important to emphasize that our intention is not to transform the cafe into a live music venue or evening bar. We are focused on maintaining its character as a relaxed space for socializing and enjoying light refreshments. It is challenging for us to predict every type of event that may come up in the future. And given the broad scope of this license application, we can understand that it may raise questions. However, we want to make it clear that we have no intention of changing our current business model and offerings. The purpose of this application is to start anew with a fresh premise license, free from complicated, irrelevant, and sometimes contradictory conditions of our current license, not as a starting point for something new. It's probably fair to say that it is the weddings that we host that most representations were written with reference to. And so to give a little more background, I'd like to explain that when advertising our wedding venue, we make it clear that music can go on until 11 p.m. with the bar closing 30 minutes later. This 30-minute drifting off period encourages gradual disbursement of guests as opposed to a departure en masse. However, we understand that some couples may prefer a slightly later finishing time. So to accommodate their preferences, we offer the option for us to submit a temporary event notice, asking for music until midnight and the bar to close 30 minutes later. For this extension to the norm, we charge a fee of £350, which in part serves as a deterrent for those who are not adamant about extending their celebrations until midnight. Restricting things further, we've implemented several other in-house policies. For instance, we now only offer the option of submitting a temporary event notice for weddings on Fridays and Saturdays, and even then, only if the couple have booked our holiday properties. We have 3 self-catering holiday lets as part of our offering. These measures reduce the number of potential late-night events whilst keeping the venue a viable choice to those couples who simply would not book us without the option. Please note that some of these policies were only introduced at the beginning of this year, so their full effect will not be felt until next year and onwards. So couples who have already booked their wedding for the remainder of 2023 or 2024 likely made their arrangements in 2022 or possibly earlier before these policies existed. As a result of our own policies, and indeed our own limited ambitions as a venue, there will not be an increase in the number of late-night weddings beyond what we have already been hosting for the past few years. I would also like to clarify the reason for our cautious approach in including proactive measures to support the 4 licensing objectives within our application. Unlike a traditional restaurant or bar that operates in a similar way every day, our events at Dean's Court can vary significantly in scale and nature, from intimate weddings for 30 guests to larger celebrations with 170 plus attendees, school proms with cohorts of teachers present, and even open-air theatre productions. So we were mindful not to rush into offering up conditions for the license that may not be uniformly applicable to all of our events. And we wanted to avoid being boxed into a rigid set of conditions as we had experienced in the past. In summary, our venue operates primarily as a wedding venue, with private events supplementing our offerings. We do not seek to engage in marquee-based public events or transform our cafe into a late-night entertainment venue. Our goal is to maintain the integrity of our business model while streamlining the process for occasional later weddings and eliminating the unnecessary conditions currently in place. I'm now going to pass over to Georgia, who is going to respond to some of the topics raised in the letters of representation.
So firstly, I'd like to emphasise that we acknowledge and take very seriously any concerns regarding noise disturbance in relation to events taking place at Dean's Court. Over the years, we have made significant efforts to minimise the impact of noise from our wedding venue, and as also stated by the objectors, a line of direct communication has constantly been established, no matter the time of day or night. It has even been mentioned by our neighbours that, albeit informally, matters have been dealt with, suggesting a level of resolution has been achieved to date. In fact, we maintain a detailed record of all correspondence, including phone calls and emails related to noise complaints across all of our businesses. Last year, out of approximately 45 events hosted over the year, we received complaints directly to us for 6 weekends. This year, prior to the public notice of this application being displayed, we received 7 complaints, with 6 coming from the same individual. Moreover, 5 of those 6 from the same individual were made before 9:30 p.m, including one at 3:40 p.m. and another at 4:20 p.m. on the same day. After the public notice was posted, we did receive more calls, and now the total number of individuals who have contacted us in relation to the noise this year amounts to 3. Despite the unfavourable suggestion that the onus is placed on the neighbours to make contact in the occasion of noise disturbance, feedback from calls, emails, and in-person visits are the only information available to us in determining the effect we are having on the surrounding area. We do, of course, make our own checks throughout the evening, but noise and nuisance is subjective, and in our case comes with many complicating factors. For instance, the location of the marquee, which is at the bottom end of the gardens towards the surrounding fields. And perhaps it's testament that our somewhat crude method works for a large proportion of the events, if not necessarily all. Our honest view is that we do not consider the occasional overspill of noise from our marquee to be prejudicial to health or cause a persistent, consistent, and unreasonable disturbance to neighbouring properties. Please do bear in mind that Wimborne is a vibrant town, boasting numerous restaurants, pubs and bars, including the Dancing Moose, a bar and cookhouse, which closes at 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights, typically featuring live bands, and of course the Wetherspoons, which closes at midnight on Sundays to Thursdays and 1 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. It's part and parcel of the nighttime economy that there will inevitably be some level of noise within the area, so we must acknowledge that those who have chosen to reside in the heart of a lively town should reasonably expect to be aware of the activities and events taking place in their vicinity. And we must recognise the broader context of the town's vibrant social scene and the coexistence of various establishments and activities. As a quick side note, and to demonstrate the nuances of noise and how it is perceived, it is perplexing to us how one person concluded that noise had increased since lockdown. We are unsure how such a conclusion was drawn, as on a subjective and practical level, nothing has materially changed since our current marquee was installed in 2015. It's also worth mentioning that while there are numerous mentions of neighbours contacting us to express their discontent of noise, there is little mention of the fact that we immediately attempt to mediate the noise levels by insisting the band or DJ reduce the volume, or as is more often the case, the bass, and then returning the call to make sure a difference is felt. We have spoken with Environmental Health on a number of occasions who confirmed that of the 2 complaints they had on their logs, neither were followed up by a complainant. Again, we feel this perhaps points to the noise being occasionally audible, but not necessarily consistently unbearable. Other conversations with Environmental Health have led us to understand that acoustic measurement devices can be difficult to interpret accurately due to various environmental conditions affecting the transmission of noise. Therefore, we respectfully request that specific equipment, such as decibel readers, not be incorporated into the licence, as some representations have requested, as they may be challenging to manage and enforce effectively. And given our setup and location, they may not deliver the result they are intended to anyway. I'd like to mention a few other points raised in the representations that we feel need addressing. Regarding the comment on our Gatehouse holiday rental property, it was disheartening to hear it raised in this way. As the writer of that letter knows, we have taken extensive measures to reduce noise coming from the Gatehouse, including padlocking the hot tub during evening events when the house is booked by the wedding couple, making it unusable for any after-wedding party. What's more, their calls regarding the Gatehouse occupants' use has dropped from the 3 last year to 0 this year. In fact, we've had no calls regarding the Gatehouse this year from any neighbour. We hope this can now safely be treated as an issue of the past. And while we understand that it might not have been one of the primary objections, we would like to address the concern raised about the potential impact of noise from the marquee on wildlife and nesting birds. We want to reassure the writer and the wider community that we have been actively working with Dorset Wildlife Trust since 2019. And the results of surveys conducted over the last few years show evidence of increasing flora and fauna in the local area surrounding us. We take environmental stewardship seriously, and our commitment to rewilding and utilising environmental grants and government schemes is testament to our dedication to preserving and enhancing the local wildlife habitat. The estate has a profound interest in safeguarding the environment and supporting the well-being of our wildlife population. Another letter raised concerns that we were looking to licence additional areas, when in fact this application seeks to reduce the licensable area from our current licence. There are a few mentions of a drinking up time, and we'd like to explain that we opt to close the bar 30 minutes after the music ends to allow for a gradual winding down of the event, encouraging guests to leave gradually instead of all at once, which helps to mitigate potential disturbance. It's worth noting that there were several mentions that we do finish promptly at 11, therefore showing that we really do respect the end time as stipulated in our licence, be it under our current premises licence or an extended end time under a 10. Regarding the objections suggesting that our wedding guests leave intoxicated and become argumentative, or that clashes occur between out-of-towners and locals, we simply have no knowledge of such incidents, and not through any lack of interest. We take great pride in maintaining a safe and secure environment for our guests, and we deploy a dedicated steward at the end of Deans Court Lane for every wedding from 6:45 p.m. until the departure of the last guest. This area is never left unattended, except for perhaps brief moments when the steward may need to enter the main grounds. Moreover, weddings by their nature are celebratory, and unlike, for instance, a sporting event, rarely generate opposing sides. Incidents mentioned in the objections are highly unlikely to occur, even less likely to occur without our knowledge, and we can only assume the writer misunderstood what they may have heard going on in Wimborne. Speaking of misunderstandings, we'd also like to raise a concern we have regarding the recurring misallocation of other people's noise to a Deans Court event. On several occasions, we have received calls asking us to turn down our music when no event was taking place at Deans Court. In fact, one of the individuals who wrote an objection letter to this committee called us on the 8th of July this year to complain about a noise that was actually emanating from a rave occurring 2 fields away, and certainly not on Deans Court's land. And though we would not suggest this happens every weekend, it is true to say that these events, often later and louder than ours, are the ones more likely to give rise to misplaced blame. This situation leads us to question whether any noise heard by local residents is mistakenly attributed to us, and we want to ensure that any concerns raised are based on accurate information and not mere assumptions or misattributions. On a related note, we'd like to clarify that the Forest School Nursery mentioned in the objections is not a Deans Court business, but rather a tenant on the estate, and any noise complaints related to the Forest School should really be directed to the Forest School, and hopefully will not interfere with our application. Regarding the comments and suggestions surrounding the vehicle entrances and exits and the possible use of Poole Road entrance for guest arrival and departure, while we're open to discussing this further, it is essential to consider the logistical challenges of using that gate. The Poole Road entrance is significantly farther from the event space, posing security and monitoring issues. Additionally, it opens directly onto a busy road with some visibility restrictions, making it less than ideal for guest access. Many of our guests also choose to stay in accommodations closer to the heart of Wimborne Square, making the Deans Court Lane entrance more convenient for their arrival and departure, and so redirecting guests to the Pool Road exit could result in confusion and potentially create disruptions as they navigate unfamiliar routes. Taxi drivers may also encounter difficulties if guests simply book a collection for Deans Court and the driver not knowing which gate to enter via, leading to more confusion. But as a testament to our commitment to minimise disturbance, we have explored the idea of having taxis enter the main site and collect guests in front of Deans Court House on the gravel apron. We trialled this approach on the Saturday just gone, which didn't seem to cause too much trouble. However, with only 2 taxis arriving on that particular day, it is not a new procedure we yet feel fully able to ratify. Normally, we estimate that somewhere between 5 to 8 taxis would visit on a typical wedding night. The process is supervised by our steward, ensuring a controlled and orderly collection process as possible. While we understand that a few taxis may occasionally create noise, the overall scale of the collection is manageable and unlikely to pose a significant issue on a regular basis. Now, one comment above all others struck us as hurtful, and that is, and I quote, Deans Court has openly declared that they did not wish to converse with Queen Elizabeth's Court residents on this subject. Prior to our application being submitted, we had not received any communication from Queen Elizabeth Court this year, and even last year we had minimal contact with only one person from QE Court, so we were quite understandably unaware that any issue would have existed, which would also stand to reason when you note the location of our marquee versus the location of QE Court. On the other hand, we have an ongoing and constructive relationship with several of the Millstream Lane residents, who are in a closer proximity to and less shielded from our marquee. We meet with them at least once a year and have regular phone calls to address any concerns and explain revised processes aiming to minimise disruption to the best of our ability. Indeed, we delayed submitting this application until we were able to arrange a meeting with several Millstream residents. This is how seriously we value our neighbourly relations. And then, as soon as it became apparent that QE Court was seemingly affected, I arranged to meet and had, I believe, a positive meeting with the head of the QE Court Association, and I anticipate further fruitful collaboration. We have already implemented his request for us to publish on our website the dates of our midweek events and our events where music go on past 11. On the whole, the representation seemed to accept the status quo while being concerned about an increase to our late-night operations. But it is important to note that the proposal of a new licence is not so that we can seek to increase the number of events we host, or that we want to allow events to run until midnight. To address these concerns, perhaps we should have considered applying for a licence allowing music until 11 o'clock and alcohol service until 11:30 from Sunday to Thursday, as it currently is, and then music until midnight and alcohol service until 12:30 for Fridays and Saturdays only. As Jonathan mentioned, we currently advertise our venue as available until 11 o'clock for music, with midnight finishes offered at an additional cost. While we seek to reduce the admin around later finishes through this application, i.e. reduce the need for temporary event notices, we maintain that our standard operation will remain until 11 o'clock. Due to the nature of our industry, it is not possible to predict exactly how many couples want a later end time and on which day exactly. Rather, an umbrella approach had to be applied, which regrettably gives the wrong impression. We discussed this very predicament with licensing and the fact that we could not conceive suitable wording for a condition to be attached to the license to this effect, but we would like to explain to those who may not know that a premises license can always be reviewed. So, if we fall foul of the commitments we are making today in terms of frequency of midnight finishes, the licensing team are always on hand to facilitate a review of the license if it becomes necessary. Our current practice involves using temporary event notices to achieve the same outcome. This new application aims to reduce administrative burdens and eliminate the need for temporary event notices, ensuring we have the flexibility to operate until midnight when or if required. It's important to make the distinction here that we do not want to run events 7 days a week, and applying for this extended license is not to hold more frequent events. We understand that the concerns raised revolve around the perception of extended hours, but our intent is to maintain the status quo while providing certainty to those clients who qualify despite our in-house restrictions on extending until midnight. In conclusion, with reference to the objections raised, we have responded to the more relevant points with transparency and clarity. I hope you can see from our representation that first and foremost, we take noise disturbance concerns seriously and have implemented a number of measures to mitigate as much impact as possible. We sincerely hope that everyone can acknowledge the delicate balance we strive to maintain as a business. While we make every effort to minimise noise spillage and be considerate to our neighbours, we must also acknowledge that it is impossible to guarantee absolute silence in every surrounding area. We want to emphasise that we continuously take our neighbours and their well-being and comfort into account when making operational decisions and designing the services we offer to our couples. Our goal has always been to maintain a harmonious relationship with our neighbours while operating a successful and responsible events venue. We appreciate your consideration and hope that you'll grant us a licence, understanding that we are committed to minimising disruption while offering our venue as a memorable space for celebrations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a really comprehensive report there. And my list of questions just got shorter and shorter because you've answered most of them. Right. Councillors, do you have any questions?
Just a confirmation on your business model. You intend to only offer the late night of Friday and Saturday nights. That's what you applied for? I thought you'd applied for all week.
Yeah, that's right. So we initially did apply for, and our application is for the 7 nights. I think that was born really from the conversations that we had with licensing to essentially have a simple and blanket license. But as we mentioned in the speech there, in hindsight, we do see now and possibly should have seen that it does look quite scary to apply to midnight. And so if we have no intention of offering those couples Sunday to Thursday on until midnight going forward, although, as we mentioned, there are some couples who would have booked prior to those policies coming in. But if it's more agreeable for everyone, absolutely, we're happy to only have that midnight and midnight 30 on the Fridays and Saturdays, and then leave things as it were, leave things as they are for the Sunday nights to Thursday nights. It's very much not our intention to do midnights on those school nights, as they're often referred to.
Hello. On page 31 of the agenda, page 17 of your application, section D, where it says the prevention of public nuisance. I'll speak nearer to the microphone because Catherine might tell me off. It said, hold on a second, that the manager, licence holder or other competent person shall carry out observations in the vicinity of the properties at Dean Court on at least 3 occasions between 2100 and 2300 licensable events taken in place to establish whether there is a noise breakout from the marquee. If your licence is till 12 or 12:30, why are you only running that till 11 o'clock? Sorry.
I think, I'm absolutely happy to change that to whatever time we need to. Certainly, if we have an event going on, again, it's one of those complicated things. Ordinarily, and for the majority of our events, it will only be until 11 anyway. It's only going to be the times when we offer the couple to go on until midnight. So, in a sense, it would be strange for us to have a condition that says for every event we need to monitor the noise at, say, 11:45, if, of course, the event ended at 11. And also, in a way, if we don't monitor the noise until, say, 11:45, almost, the horse is bolted by that point. So we want to sort of be checking it during the course of the evening, as opposed to, the final sort of 15 minutes of the event. But if it pleases everyone, we can sort of reword that perhaps and sort of make regular checks, from 11:30, whatever timing sort of works and makes it kind of more suitable for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think perhaps that might be something that could be looked at, but thank you.
Can I just to clarify on that? I mean, it is more of an actual ongoing process anyway. So as we've explained, we have a steward at the end of Dean's Court Lane for the duration of the evening. So it's that steward that's in radio contact with the team working in the marquee. And really any point that they think do you know, this noise might be a little bit louder than usual. Maybe there's less wind in the air. Maybe there's less rain or the trees or whatever they're doing. If they think, oh, this might be a little bit noisier, they will you make contact with the team anyway. So it's kind of like an ongoing process. It would naturally have happened.
Thank you. With regards to your temporary events notices, how many would you say roughly that you've had? I'm not expecting you to pinpoint if you haven't got that information to hand, but would you say that you're at more of the maximum of the ones that you can have throughout a year?
So prior to this year, we've never used up the maximum number. This year we have, and this is our busiest year that we've ever hosted. So to give a sort of an idea, pre-COVID, we were usually doing in the region of sort of 20 to 25 weddings a year. We did a few more sort of following COVID. We had that sort of concertinaing effect of weddings that were postponed. So this we believe to be our peak year. And then looking at bookings going forward for next year, I can't see us going over the number of tens that you're allowed to apply for each year. So this we've never gone over the number. Well, you can't go over the number, and so we've never sort of needed to. But this year, yes. Previously, no.
And you've never had any objections from TENS, obviously, bearing in mind, obviously, a temporary events notice can only be objected to by the authorities, and you've had nothing, obviously, you've never come to committee with regards to a temporary events notice?
No, never. We've never had any issues whatsoever.
And when you run your temporary events notices, do you run it as do you take into account your conditions that you have on your licence? Because obviously, with a temporary events notice being granted, you don't need to, but just to know as to whether you do have, some courtesy around that.
Yeah, so obviously, as you can think, running a business and training staff, we have in-house policies that will be in place regardless. So for us, weddings that are running under a 10 will definitely be treated in the same respect as any other event running under our overarching licence.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Obviously, in the report, there have been some conditions that have been obviously discussed with yourselves from Dorset Police, and you are happy and content with those conditions that they've offered up. Just want to look at one of those conditions, and don't know if you can elaborate a bit more on what it means. It's that the premises licence holder will dynamically assess each event to determine if door supervisors shall be required to vet customers and maintain public order. What is your dynamic assess on that?
Well, so this is actually followed on from a telephone conversation we had with John Bean, and it goes back to the whole nature of the business, is that we can't say that we will have a door supervisor for every event. It just wouldn't make sense. Some of the events are in the day, some of the events are only sort of 30 people, and so on. And so, on asking him, what's the best way for us to appease that sort of requirement, and he says he gave the wording to us to say, if you dynamically assess, so for every event that you had, you look at it and you say, would it be reasonable, would it be appropriate to have a door supervisor or have a steward or what have you, then he felt that he was comfortable with that approach.
Okay, it's the wording that I have concerns about, because you could quite easily be sat in a room and see an event unfold, and it could all be too late. So, and I understand what you're saying with the type of event, but I'm going to come back to Aileen on that one and just see if she's got anything to add to that.
Thank you, Chair. Usually you would see a condition worded to a risk assessment carried out. So it would normally be a risk assessment to see whether security are needed. It can vary from just a verbal one, or you can specify that it's a written risk assessment, and then records get kept and we can go and view those.
Thank you. That makes more sense. That's useful. Thank you very much.
Can I just ask about the complaints you've received? and any report that came to you from environmental health, or did environmental health visit? I'm just asking because I see environmental health got no problem with this application, so I'm just clarifying that.
So from what I can recall, I think a couple of years ago, and we're talking sort of pre-COVID, a few years ago, we did have a call to say that he had received a call. I think it was Darren Nadine at the time, and I think he's back in post there now, actually. So he called up to say, you know, I've had a complaint, you know, just wanted to kind of let you know. But he explained that it was not followed up. You know, he said it was sort of left to the complainant to make a diary, make a log, and sort of then it could be followed up from there, and it was essentially completely dropped. Being very concerned about this, because this was the first time in all the years that we've been running that we'd had environmental health call us. We invited Darren and his colleague over to show him the marquee. Again, this is several years back. And at that time, I was saying, look, we don't want to have this problem again. Do you think we should start installing noise limiters? I've seen them at other venues and whatnot. And that's when the conversations began of saying, look, you know, one complaint to environmental health for the 8 or so years that you've so far been running does not reach the limit, or does not reach the bar of needing to install sound limiters and things like this. So he was very comfortable and satisfied with that level. So that was a few years back. I don't believe that he has had anything, or that environmental health have had anything, certainly within the past sort of 3 years. As far, I don't believe, and certainly I'm not sort of actively aware of it. And it seems like Eileen's shaking her head that it doesn't seem like we've had anything at all. But yeah.
I think that there have been notable problems. They've been here today. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned the party in the paddock. Was that nothing to do with you? Was that another company, or you didn't hold that event? It wasn't, but there was a lot of complaints. I just wanted a little bit more explanation about that.
Yeah, so Party in the Paddock is an event. So if you're familiar, Wimborne has a folk festival weekend, the second weekend in June every year for as long as I've been alive, I think. And so there used to be a big place that the young people could go on the cricket pitch, which is now the Wimborne Waitrose. So noting that they needed a space for this event to go, it seemed to work well. We have this paddock on Poole Road that was available, and so we rent it to a company called Wimborne Events Management. And so this is run by two chaps, a teacher and a fire professional. And so they run it entirely separately from Dean's Court. They hired the grounds for approximately 2 weeks, a Monday to the following Friday. They do everything themselves. They run it under their own premise license entirely, and it's completely separate, other than the fact that we rent them the field, that Harris fencing goes up, and they might give us a few tickets and something like that, but we do not get involved. And I believe, and I believe actually they work very closely with Dorset Police. They work obviously closely with fire, and it's held as a bit of a example of good event management, and very much necessary for the Wimborne Folk Festival, which does have an element of youth that want to have somewhere. So to have a place that's well managed, well contained, very secured, it works very well. But there's always been a confusion around whether it's an event that we are running simply because it's on our land, but it's very, very separate.
Just touching on what you were saying earlier about the conditions on your current licence that you have at the moment, you say that obviously some of those conditions on there that you obviously, not the fact you don't see the point in having on there, but you see that they seem pretty irrelevant. I'm not asking you to go through all of them because obviously I've seen it, but what are the ones that concern you that are on there that you would like to have removed?
I mean, to be honest, as I say, this entire process here was really kind of instigated by licensing. We were actually, in many ways, quite happy sort of bumbling along, doing what we were doing. We've always felt like it would be nice to have a cleaner license, and we've spoken in the past about whether we could do that. But I think at the time, we were advised that to clean it up to the extent that we want to would count as am I right in saying this, a large alteration as opposed to a major alteration as opposed to a minor? And so so at the time they said, in any event, if you're going to do that, you may as well just apply for a new license. And we sort of thought, oh goodness, that's going to that will be tricky. So so we just sort of left it. But I think with the encouraging words from licensing, police, environmental health, and fire, sort of saying, look, in effect, we're likely to support an application because we know that we've got that history of well-run events and so on and so on. Sorry, that's why we went ahead. But I mean, you've seen the license. I mean, you've got things in there like tarmacadding in a drive, or cutting down a laurel bush, or even the ones where our license runs until 11 o'clock, but it says on 6 occasions a year you can run until 11:30, and all this sort of thing, and the number of times you can and can't use the Pool Road entrance and so on. So it's just very cumbersome, you've seen it.
Yes, I have. Yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. I might have some more questions a bit later on. Councillors, do you have any further questions for the applicant? Are you coming to me? It's okay, Phil, because obviously I said to you about the police's conditions that they've put forward and that you were happy with them, but obviously Phil's just alerted me that obviously at the bottom of your email that there were, you did have some concerns, additional conditions. Go on, yes.
So I was just asking the chair whether the committee would like to ask you about the email exchange that you had with the police. And I think the police put forward some conditions they'd suggested from a licence in another area. And you said you were happy with the 3 that are now up for consideration by the members, but some of the other potential conditions from that extra licence you said you were nervous about having on on this licence. And I was asking the members if they would like to ask you why you were nervous about having those imposed. So it's the additional ones suggested by the police, not the 3 that you.
These are the ones I think from the venue in Exeter. I think it's the ones you're talking about, and it just keeps harking back to the breadth of our events that we have. If we're doing we've got a 15-person baby shower coming up in our cafe on a Sunday afternoon, and so if we're suddenly having door staff and this and that, it just becomes so difficult. So, and because our license covers our cafe, our mansion house, the marquee, the grounds, it becomes so difficult to sort of say now exactly what we're going to do for every single event. And I think the conversations, again, with licensing, environmental health and police and fire have sort of indicated really that we've built up a certain level of trust and a certain level of track record of saying, actually, we do host these very responsibly. There is always recourse in the future if we start to deviate from that course. In a way, the whole point of this application was to reduce some of those overbearing conditions, which may well be appropriate, and which I'm sure are appropriate for a venue which is doing the same thing each week, or even if we were starting afresh with no track record. I can totally understand a licensing subcommittee might want to see some control put on there because we would be an unknown entity. But I think the impression that we got, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, was that we've been running for so long with very little sort of concern. If something were to come up, they know that they would be able to address it with us. And that's really what my answer to John Bean there was, to say, look, the things that he's said about the Exeter venue, most of which I think we sort of do anyway. It's kind of just part and parcel of good event management. And as much as we don't want to interfere with neighbours and we don't want to cause public harm and all the rest of it, we also want safety and security at our venue. It's a historic mansion house. We don't want rowdy, drunk crowds breaking windows or doing all sorts of things. So we do that anyway. And it's just the concern was building in this rigid structure back into our license again, sort of it wouldn't leave us any better off. We just sort of hold a whole lot of different conditions rather than the ones that we have now, which is why I think those three that we did agree to, which was the dynamically assessing the door staff, the Challenge 25, which of course we do anyway, and the incident report register, which of course we do anyway. It felt, if that made them happy to see that written down, fantastic. It's not a problem for us. You know, we do it anyway. But I think the others, from what I can recall, they were a little bit more, yes, we do them at weddings, and yes, we might do them at other sort of big evening events at the Marquee, but no, we're not quite ready to have them applied universally across all of our events, is sort of where we stood. And he seemed very, very happy with that.
Okay, and obviously you have your risk assessment that you do prior to your event, any events anyway. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Aileen, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, I will now go to our people that have made representations. I'm going to go down through the list, and like I said, this is your opportunity now to ask questions of the applicant. Obviously, when I mean questions, it has to warrant an answer. And like I said, you will get your chance to have your say as well as the applicant has, and obviously any questions that the applicant may ask you, but that will come on shortly. So this, as I said, this is your chance to ask any question of what either the applicant has put in the report or what they have just spoke about now. So I'm going to go down through the list. So I will start with Mr. Dovey. Mr. Dovey, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Concerning the events at Dean's Court, do you have or have you carried out a formal risk assessment involving acoustic engineers to work out the background decibel levels and the level of nuisance being caused by speakers when the music is really booming? Because in my experience, when I've had to build warehouses in Hamworthy and run a business from there for 25 years, I've had to do a formal risk assessment and I've had to engage noise acoustic engineers because what gets measured gets done. And it seems to me that we haven't got any noise measurements to pin anything against here at all. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Sorry, that...
So in the past, there has been acoustic engineers on site. So this was primarily around, there was in 2009, 10 and 11, a Feast of Dorset music festival. So you'll see in the license conditions, there's a lot of there's a lot that are falling under the category of events larger than 1,000 people. In fact, we sort of didn't really mention that in our speech, but this was, I think at the time, we were looking at doing this Feast of Dorset, which was a food festival that we hosted over a weekend, and that was a much larger event. And there was something in the evening on I think the Saturday night called After Dark or something like that. This is slightly before my time. This is, say, 2009, kind of 2010. And so, yes, there were there was acoustic engineers that would come, and they would be there throughout the evening for that particular event. It was a much larger scale, as I say, over 1,000 people, outside speakers and all the rest of it. We've spoken with environmental health, about these sort of noise readings, and this is one of the conditions which they have sort of indicated is a very difficult. It's a very difficult topic. I mean, anyone who knows the sort of the technicalities of decibels, which is, in many ways, the real detail of it is far beyond me. But the problem that we face with that is it's not just as easy as measuring what may or may not be coming from the marquee, because each event could be different. So you could have a band, you could have a DJ, you could have acoustic music. And then each property nearby is so far away from the marquee that if you were to measure actual background noise, what we potentially could be measuring would be cars going past, and also it's not so much the volume. And again, I think it's what people generally experience is not necessarily the volume of the music, but the potentially a very sort of low-level underlying bass. And that's a very difficult thing for acoustic devices to pick up, as I say, especially when events are different each week. You know, the bands or the speaker systems are different each week. The properties are at various different places. And as Georgia mentioned in her part of the speech, you know, really this decibel side of things is, it seems like a really fantastic solution to a potential question. But the practicalities of doing it are such that in all the conversations we've had with environmental health, the indication is, look, you know, that's not really something that's going to be practical and sort of workable, and it's not something that they've ever sort of been able to offer us much kind of direction to, and it's not something that they've pressed or challenged us for. We have written a noise management plan that Darren has agreed, and he's happy with that plan that we have. And it involves, rather than digital acoustic tests, it involves our steward or what have you making their own, somewhat crude, but human tests. You know, what can I hear? What time of night is it? Is it raining tonight? Is the wind strong tonight? You know, is it cold enough that the sides of the marquee have been rolled down, and therefore that's containing noise a bit more, and all these sort of different factors. So that's where we are with acoustic measurements. They're not necessarily digital, but it's a human approach to a very sort of difficult thing to measure, digitally. I think Georgia wants to sort of add to that as well.
Sorry, just on the management side of it, of each particular event. So just to add on what obviously Jonathan said, yes, measuring the scientific sort of decibels absolutely seems to be something that could be a solution on first glance. However, by having a steward at the end of the lane, at the closest point to the square, we're actually managing the impact of that sound when it reaches the closest point. We could be measuring it at the source, and then with those extra conditions like the weather and everything else, it could not, the impact of it, you can't hear it. But having the human approach, that means that we can actually be flexible to each event and each sort of condition, which I think is much more dynamic, much more proactive than necessarily just measuring the decibels at the marquee.
Thank you.
So what you're basically telling me is you haven't got a formal noise risk assessment with decibel levels. And what makes your situation any different from my situation? When I ran a business for 25 years in Hamworthy, I had 8 neighbours backing onto me, and I had to measure the decibel levels of activities on site over a week, and that was a condition from the local council. What gets measured gets done, and it seems to me that we need to pin this down. Wouldn't you agree?
I'm just going to come in on that point. Obviously, we've got no representation from Environmental Protection with regards to this application. If Environmental Protection had a concern, we would have papers and papers and papers in front of us. There have been, obviously, a couple of complaints have gone into Environmental Protection in the past, but nothing's been upheld. So it would need to, so basically, if there is an issue around the noise, then complaints do need to go into Environmental Protection. So Environmental Protection are aware of these complaints. They will give diaries for them to, write down the times that you're having concerns and everything. And I know that the whole decibel thing is far beyond my remit as well, and it is. I find it very, very complicated. But my concern, well, it is to me. My concern is that obviously we have no representation here from Environmental Protection, and obviously Environmental Protection are happy with what the applicant are doing at the time. Okay, I don't want, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that you're saying that you're doing the maximum that you are being expected. Is that correct? Yeah, I just didn't want to go around in circles with this one, but I fully appreciate what you're saying. But if I would have liked to have seen some representation here, if there has been a real issue, I'd have liked to have seen some representation from Environmental Protection, but they've put nothing in. Is that go to some way to answer your question?
Yes, no. Sorry.
Cool. Aileen.
Maybe I could assist. I presume that your assessment was for planning?
It was.
Yeah, so planning often do require noise assessments, they require wildlife assessments, they will require all sorts of different things. This is completely different. This is a licensing application and there is no requirement for that. So as you know, the process is the application comes in, it goes out to the responsible authorities and notices get put up. And according to the guidance, the guidance issued by the government, we have to accept, or you have to accept, that environmental health are your experts when it comes to advice on this. But the main difference that Mr. Dovey is referring to is because his was a planning application. Yeah.
I did have to have a supplementary auditory set of tests done by Ian Sharland, who is a leading expert in this country. I had to have that done mid-tenure when I was chief executive of this company, and that was when activities were being undertaken. And what measures gets done, this dynamic evaluation, I have no idea of what does that mean. Please define that in decibel levels, because it's gobbledygook to me.
That would have come under, like Aileen alerted to you, obviously yours came under planning. And obviously this is licensing, which is very different, but take your points on board. Do you have any further questions? No, okay, thank you. Julia Herbert, do you have any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. And I've got Stephen and Catherine Hughes. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, hi. Can I just clarify about the environmental health? Because I phoned environmental health pre-lockdown. I also phoned licensing and I had no response. I was asked to phone Jonathan at the time to put my case forward. And I have continued to do so. So sort of, I didn't ever think about phoning environmental health again. But, you know, I could have done on quite a few occasions. But Georgia and Jonathan have been very proactive when I call, and I do call a lot, in trying to resolve the call. So I just wanted to say that about environmental health. May I ask Georgia, you said there was an event on July the 8th where you had a call, that was me. And there was another event going on, but can I ask Georgia, was there an event at your premises on July the 8th?
Do you say, was there an event? Yes, there was an event on that day as well, which is why actually, because one of our procedures that we do is when I receive a phone call, I actually go directly to the supervisor in the evening of the event, contact them, and make sure that obviously they follow up, make sure they speak to the DJ, speak to the band, and actually they had, and I'm not saying this is scientific in any way, but we've been trying to find ways we can monitor it ourselves in-house. And they had their own like decibel reader, and they said actually while that may not be super accurate, the levels were so much lower than what they recorded the week before, so it meant that we can monitor our own sort of noise levels. And so it actually prompted him to go and explore what you could be hearing, because we've actually said this quite a lot with our neighbours, that we're quite happy to go and actually see and experience the disruption that you're experiencing yourselves. And that's when he found out that literally on the other side of Julian's Bridge, there was a very big event happening that would have been audible. And I think you possibly agreed when I spoke to you that you were aware of that event, and therefore it may have been a plausible thing that's where it came from. But yes, there was an event. And in this case, it worked well because there was an event there, so I could go to my source and then go and explore and find out that actually it wasn't us. That one, it was, I think, an extension. No, the raise. Oh, I mean, that was like past even when we packed down. And I think there was even on the next day as well, there was some activity, but I can't obviously say what sort of activity.
Yes, thank you. I was well aware there was another event going on, and from our house, when Dean's Court has an event, there are lights, it's completely different to how it usually comes across. Plus, I can tell where music is coming from. So I suppose until you experience from our perspective, then there's always going to be that difference. But I just wanted to confirm that there was an event then. Thank you.
Do you have any further questions?
I think you've covered quite a bit of this already. It would appear that establishing the noise level is not done very scientifically, but you do have an established noise level that you work to, I understand. Is that correct?
So I don't know whether I know do you know the accurate number? It's more of a way of us kind of monitoring it and comparing it to other events. You probably have the...
I think it'd be helpful, and I think you put it quite well. There's definitely an attractive idea of having a decibel meter, and as I have already said, this was actually when I was under this impression as well. It's something I wanted to install, and spoke to Darren from Environmental Health and saying, would this be something that's going to solve our problems? Because if I know that if those lights turn red, we're too loud, or if those lights are green, we're doing okay, then that's, a big help to us. And we've been consistently told that's really not, in our case, something that's going to prove helpful. There's so many complicating factors. So I think your question, but ask it again if I was wrong, is do we have a specific number or a specific readout that we can use? No is the answer to that question. We don't have equipment that is such that we can say it's this decibels. But even if we did, I don't believe it's as simple as a simple decibel, because you have frequency, you have bass, you have the distance it can travel, and even if we were to measure it within our marquee, is it raining? Is it windy? Are there leaves on the trees? Are the marquee sides up or down? It's so much more complicated. And I think you've probably seen within the application, or you will have seen within the application, a layout of our site. And again, I think all of these are related to the marquee as opposed to the house or what have you. The marquee is on the far south lawn. So we have all of the distance of the south lawn, then the main house, then a belt of trees before we arrive at residence. So it's Millstream is the house doesn't sit between the marquee and Millstream, just the band of trees, and then the QE Court has the house between as well. So there's so many different ways that the noise can bounce off and change and what have you, that I hope that helps to explain why the idea of this box that would just tell us, green light, red light is just not something that's really practical.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. The next question, part of that really, as you've established it was a no. It's totally subjective then, in other words. It's a person or series of persons listening to the sound and going, that sounds a bit too noisy. And the next question is, how do you get whoever's responsible for the amplification to turn it down? And how do you ensure they have, if you haven't got a measurement to start with?
Sorry, I went too soon, sorry. So just to make sure I'm clear on your question, so how do I make sure the band turn it down? No, that's fine. So basically, as we said, we've got this line, this telephone line that you can literally contact us at any point, at any time in the evening. I will receive that noise complaint. I will go straight to the evening supervisor who is in charge of that, obviously the later part of the wedding or event or whatever it is. And they go directly to the DJ and obviously or the band and tell them to turn it down. So in actual fact, we do take your word for it and we do make sure, because it's obviously something that you're experiencing. We would collaborate with our steward as well to make sure, because obviously he's experiencing it at the end of Dean's Court Lane as well. And then we would go to the actual source and say, can you turn it down? And I've got to say, we've never had a problem where they've refused. Also, it's quite good to point out at this point that when bands or DJs arrive, we are very, very clear with them on briefing them what is our license end time, albeit under a 10, or our premise license. They have to start turning it down. No more one last song or anything like that. Has to be before. In actual fact, I would almost say that we take it so seriously that we actually feel like maybe we're making it extremely tricky for entertainers to come to the events because we are very strict on it. And also, you know, we do say to them, you will, if you are notified to turn it down, you have to. So I just want to stress that as well. And just to obviously add on that, I did kind of say it earlier as well, we do always call neighbours back to make sure they felt a difference. So while we're saying, look, you know, obviously there's no decibel levels and stuff, you know, you are experiencing it. And we actually call you back and say, can you feel a difference? And there's been often times where we call back a couple of times, because when you say no, then we'll roll a side down. And we do kind of get that feedback back to you guys as well. Also, obviously, Jonathan just reminded me, another thing that we have in-house with bands and DJs is that when there is an extension and we are going past 11, and they're having a band, we ask them to switch to a DJ, and not just a DJ, if I don't want any shouting down the mics or anything, often a playlist. So we do also make that a condition that when we are going past 11, when I say a condition, an in-house condition, we really don't want that to be a condition on our license because it's not applicable to all events. And I want to echo that, you know, we're not always going past that time either. So, but yeah, we have our own in-house policies where we do say that, you know, to couples, if you're arranging a band and you're having a later time, that needs to be switched off at 11 regardless and switched over to a DJ or a playlist. Yeah. All right.
Do you have any further questions? No? Okay. Jane Nichol, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just one really. Georgia, you mentioned in your presentation earlier on that we're in a vibrant town and lots of other places have got late licenses. What I would ask you though is, are your events taking place primarily in a marquee? Because all the other venues that you mentioned in town that have got the later licenses, they're all indoors with windows closed and things, and that's what makes a big difference, I would say, that it's in a marquee.
So what is your question? That is all our events in the marquee? Yeah. So yeah, primarily our weddings were marquee based. But equally, we've got the whole of South Lawn, you know, separating us from being in the centre of town as well. So there's other factors that, you know, we're not like with brick and obviously not inside, but we do have a greater distance than these other places in question as well. So there's other conditions you need to consider.
Any further questions? No? Okay, thank you. Kate Randall, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Hi there, guys. Could you just tell me, please, how many late licenses you're allowed to apply for each year? You said that you hadn't used them in the past and you were going forward to use them. How many are there? You said you had an allocation of... That's what I meant, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, you can answer. Sorry, the question was how many are we allowed, or how many if we? I believe that we are allowed. It's slightly changed actually for these few years after COVID, but I believe it's ordinarily, correct me if I'm wrong, 12, 15 applications covering a maximum of 21 days, and 15. I think it went up to 20. Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
So possibly every Friday and Saturday through the summer, possibility? No.
I'm going to pass this over to Aileen now, because they are quite quirky, the 10s.
Who allegedly is the expert. Yeah, so you can currently have 15 10s on a premises. You could theoretically move the marquee around and you could move the 10s around. So that's kind of immature. Every single 10, though, that goes across midnight will count as 2 days. So we've got limits on days, we've got limits on times, and we've got a limit on the extent. So there's loads and loads of different limits. So you're probably looking at maximum of about 7 weddings a year that you could cover with temporary event notices. If you're going beyond midnight, that would double to 15 if you're stopping at midnight.
And with a temporary events notice, the only people that can object to a temporary events notice is the police or environmental protection. Members of the public cannot object to them, obviously. And when a temporary events notice is granted, then that in that period of time that that temporary events notice is granted for, then none of the conditions on the licence need to be adhered to. So it runs under that particular temporary events until their original licence would kick back in, which would then kick back in all their conditions, only if it was objected to and the conditions were asked to be transferred. Does that help? Okay. Did you have any further questions? No. Scott Randall, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No, not really questions. Maybe observations. Am I allowed an observation rather than a question?
There needs to be questions.
No, don't let it.
In that case, no questions. Then.
Then I have got Mr. Nicol. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do. Thank you. I would just like, firstly, to inquire about a statement that was made during the presentation from Georgia, where she said that she met with a senior person on the Queen Elizabeth Courts Residents Association. I just want to clarify if that was me. I think I mentioned at the time that that was purely a social visit based on my own personal capacity and not representing the association. I just wanted to clarify that.
I'd like to make a point of clarification, if I may. Is it actually you, Mr. Nicol, that is the chairman, or is it the actual resident that you're speaking on behalf of? Because you are here to speak on behalf of the resident.
I am not the chairman, no, of the association, and I'm speaking on behalf of the residents.
So yes, I was referring to our meeting.
I would just like to ask another question on behalf of Ms. Strachan. In terms of the noise controls and the subjectivity that seems to surround them, how do you gauge the hearing quality of the guy at the end of the street?
Well, I mean, we haven't had him medically assessed, if that's what you mean, but we have no reason to believe that his hearing would be any less, reasonable a judgment than anybody else's.
Just a further question. In terms of the measures taken, which there's spoken very eloquently around, there's also the issue of reactive to proactive measures, and it seems to be that the residents in the surrounding area must actually make the first contact and be disturbed before something actually happens.
Okay, so obviously the one element of, I think you're referring to the phone call to inform us that you're experiencing a noise disturbance. However, I'd like to point out that before, there's many events where we don't have any phone calls, and these in-house policies are still in place. So we still do our own sort of monitoring. So it's not a case of we don't do anything until we hear from you guys. There's a lot of things that we do, and hopefully successfully if you haven't needed to call in. But obviously you wouldn't be aware of those sort of in-house measures. But I assure you that regardless, every event, they are definitely taking place.
Do you have any further questions? No. Okay. I'm mindful that we've been going for sort of like an hour and a half, so I am just going to take a 5-minute comfort break if that's okay with everybody, just for you to get a bit of fresh air and stretch your legs. So if you wanted to come back for, say, I don't know, 11:35, would that suit everybody? Yeah. Right, oh, sorry, yeah, microphone. Right, okay. So I am now going to start with the residents that have made representations, and I will go down through the list, and I will start with Mr. Dovey. Mr. Dovey, do you have anything that you would like to add to your representation?
Yes, Chair, I do. What I'd like to do is amplify what I actually put in the letter and to try and bring this to life. I've lived in Millstream Close and for 27 years, and in this particular house for 25 years. And over the last 12 years, as commercial activities on the estate have escalated, the noise and nuisance has gradually got worse. It normally takes the form of loud booming noise at night and imbibed revellers yelling. What has transpired is we've sorted out an informal system, which Georgia and Jonathan have talked about, whereby we have to phone them about any noise and nuisance to tell them about what's going on their estate. As it gets later into the evening, we're loath to do so because those two individuals work very hard on the estate. They live approximately, and correct me if I'm wrong, half an hour away, and we're loath to get them out of bed because it's, as far as we're concerned, is about live and let live. So don't be under any illusion. The reason why that informal system has emerged is because we've had emerging and growing problems over the year. The estate is right in town. There are a large number of residents and families there, and they have to get up and go to work the next morning, and they have children. In the events this summer, there's going to be another late night event on a Thursday, so how is it going to impact them? And in the summer, when predominantly most of the events occur, in other words, May through September, it's increasingly getting hot. We leave our windows open and noise travels at night. So it's a lot worse in the summer. So excuse me, decibel levels are very, very important. The general rule for residents in a town is that there is a right to quiet enjoyment or to get a good night's sleep between 11 a.m. and 7 a.m. Under the 1993 and the 1996 legislation. The proposal to push the music till midnight and drinking until 12:30, puts a coach and horses through an informal system which, although it's had its problems, has worked. And we do work with, and we try and everybody here tries to maintain a very good working relationship with Georgia and Jonathan. But do note that they are half an hour away from the venue. The only person who's on the site is Sir William Hannam, and he could come out and monitor what's going on, but I don't know if he does. What I've already talked about, we need to rapidly sort out a noise risk assessment through decibel levels and employing a noise consultant, and that needs to be done by the estate. And forgive me, but whenever I've had to deal with this, and I am a trained chartered surveyor, I've actually had to pin things down, and I've actually had to answer to the council and the residents to their satisfaction. So that doesn't wash with me. I was in business for 20 to 25 years, and if you are a significant player in Wimborne, which the Hannam estate is, they need to step up and do things, in my view, properly. We're talking about monitoring and the proactive nature of the estate being proactive. One problem we've got is that it falls down to the residents to phone up either Jonathan or Georgia about the problems that are going on. With all the areas that we've been talking about concerning the acoustics and the sounds, quite often when there are activities caused, say, when they are having a wedding, the revellers will go back and stay in the gatehouse, which is advertised on Airbnb and is probably, and has got a large hot tub at the back. That's what you call today a party house. Now, last night I'll just give you an example. I don't know whether there was a wedding this weekend. I think there was. But last night at 10 past 10 in the gatehouse, Strangers in the Night by Sinatra was being blared out over the things with loud shouts, shrieks, and laughter. 10:15, you're going to like this one, Oh Baby, Give Me One More Chance by Michael Jackson. It went on at 10:20 to It's Not Unusual to Be Loved by Anyone by Tom Jones. And then at 10:25, we had Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me by Elton John with a big, big chorus. Then at 10:30, and I was really losing it by then, I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. All crystal clear, everybody belting out, and then suddenly somebody, I don't know who it was, must have phoned them because it all went dead. Now, people today have actually got to get up and work. Kids have got to go to school. Now, how can that be right and how can that be fair? The estate, before you grant anything further, need to monitor what's going on the site already. We have held back from criticising. We did not want to gum up formally things with the Environmental Health Officer and the Council. We realise you've all been cut back over the years and we didn't want to burden you. But by pushing the commercial envelope, it's forcing us down that track. And if that's the way we've got to go, that's the way we've got to go. Because that's why you haven't been hearing anything on record about there being background problems. But why do you think that things have emerged this way over the years? And why do you think all these people have turned up? Nuisance is caused. There are a large number of neighbours, and we need to be looked after in town. In short, we have a right to quiet enjoyment. That, from time to time, is being impaired. Informally, what's worked out so far has worked out after a fashion, but they're looking to actually have this 365 days a year and push the commercial envelope back into the night by an extra hour. Would you like to actually live right by them and have all of those I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor at 10:30 or 10:15, Michael Jackson, Oh Baby, Give Me One More Time? It was a right old racket. It was boom, 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 boom with the music, and effectively at the end of the day there was lots of laughter and shrieking. So as you can see, I'm quite impassioned. It's something I know a little about because I've been in business. I'm a chartered surveyor. And for my mind, there are questions to answer. And don't sweep it under the table that there's not nuisance caused. Nuisance has been caused. And if we allow this, it's going to push the envelope one more time and it's going to gum up all your inbound channels. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions?
I have a general question for all the... have you ever complained to your local Wimborne Town Council at all?
I've spoken to the Liberal Democrat people. I also approached Robin Cook. Robin Cook didn't want to actually take this matter up. I don't know for what reason, but it seemed that the Liberal Democrats on the town council might be in favour of taking it up, but I've still got to actually talk through it with them.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. I'll now go to the applicant. Do you have any questions? And again, when I mean questions, they warrant an answer, not a statement. Aileen? No? No. Thank you for your representation and thank you for your addition. And obviously you will get the chance to sum up at the end as well. Thank you very much. I will now move on to Julia Herbert. Do you have anything that you would like to add to your representation? Okay, are you sure? Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions?
No. Oh, yeah.
Go on.
Sorry, you said I've got to ask you.
Yes, you have.
Right,
It needs to be an
okay.
individual question, not a group question.
Have you ever complained to your local town council? Okay, but yeah, just a chat rather than actually a written... Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? No. Aileen, do you have any questions? No. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now go on to Stephen and Catherine Hughes. Do you have anything that you would like to add to your representation?
Yes, please. Firstly, I agree with a great deal of this gentleman from Millstream Close has said. And from the last hour or so, the conclusion I come to is the problem that's being caused to the residents is based on the fact there is no level of measurement or only subjective opinion on what noise is. I seriously doubt that a proper survey of the sound has been taken by Dean's Court, or indeed the environmental health people, when considering from the premises that surround Dean's Court. In the last licence, in the initial licence, it did say, it gave a measurement in decibels, or dBA actually, that it should be taken into consideration 1 metre from the facade of the residence. Now, at no point, I seriously doubt that that has actually been done or intended to be done. And if you were going to look at it subjectively, you actually need to be that close, such as my bedroom on the top floor of my 3-storey bed faces directly over Dean's Court. And on more than one occasion, I either can't sleep, I tend to go to bed early, or I've been woken up when I have gone to bed. We have complained about the noise level, and Georgina and Jonathan tried to help us, but in truth, it doesn't always work. But once again, this is all part of this subjective opinion to what the noise, how loud the noise is. Because it doesn't necessarily mean, if you tell the people to turn down the amplification, that they will and do. And that I can certainly witness from my ears, listening from my bedroom window, that it doesn't happen. Now, the only way to enforce that is to start employing some measurement of some kind. And I know, and Jonathan has explained the reason why they go for this dynamic assessment rather than go for a digital confirmation. But unless you've got some sort of measurement and it's taken accurately by a qualified person at the premises, i.e. 1 metre from your facade, you can't make a proper judgment. The other part of what I'd like to suggest is, I know it goes against your reluctancy to introduce digital measurement, but if you did a survey and there were some agreed sound levels of all
residence properties.
No, the sound level. Right. Okay, the sound levels obviously have to go to all the different frequency. Low frequency in particular is the disturbing thing on our estate and doubtless on the others that surround, and that'll be the drumming. But until you judge it by the different frequencies, and I know you find this difficult, Jonathan, but it needs to be done. And there are, as you well know, and I've actually said, there are devices that can be mounted at the premises where they can measure the level based on the survey that had been done. And they would indicate to the people amplifying the music whether it's acceptable. Green, it could be a traffic light. Amber, it's starting to get close. And red, it literally turns the power off. I know that because my daughter went to a similar wedding in a marquee, and if the sound reached a certain level, the electricity was cut off from the amplification equipment. And then it stayed off for a while, given the opportunity to turn it down before it came back on. Needless to say, it would continue turning off unless the music or the noise was turned down. I see no reason why that couldn't be employed, other than you're saying you'd rather treat it dynamically and without measurements of dBA or whatever it would need to be. So I'd like to ask the committee, would they consider putting these points into the conditions to make sure there is some scientific, at least effort, to make sure that you don't exceed the noise, and more importantly, you turn it down if it does exceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions?
No.
Sorry, just to ask you the same question. Have you ever complained to your local town council at all?
I've just got one question. It's with regards to the phone calls that you've made. And the only reason I've come to you with this question is because obviously, Catherine, you've mentioned that you've rang on a number of occasions. When you call on the occasions that you call on and you give your version of events of, things are too loud, do something about it, do they always call you? Do you always get a follow-up call? And when you get that follow-up call, do you always notice that there is a difference?
Yes, I do always get a follow-up call if I'm willing to stay up to wait for that call. The last time I phoned, I said, please don't call me back, just turn the music down, because I've got out of bed to phone you. The majority of the time, I can notice a difference. I wrote in my representation that on one occasion, and I did speak to Georgia, absolutely no difference. I am amazed that I can now, on my phone, I just hold my phone up, I can record and hear every single song, every single word of every single song that is being played. Whereas previously, it would have just been a dull noise. And I would have gone, do I know that one? Not sure. And it was never a disturbance. But something has changed. And I don't know what that is. Whether it's now the management a step back from actually being on the premises and relying on somebody else being on the premises, I don't know. But I would welcome anybody coming to stand on our balcony and dance along to the music.
So, from the time of you calling to the time that you're getting a response back, how long does that generally take?
Can be 15, 20 minutes.
And you would say more often than not that there is a change, or a lot of the time there is just no change?
And they're not. In my representation, I actually noted down on May the 31st, and Georgia said to me about 20 past, 25 past 11, then we have no choice but to wait till midnight.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
To be honest, no, not really a question, just an observation that Georgia and I have made. We're not necessarily sure that we would recall. It could take up to 20 minutes to have a call back. I mean, our process would just be to speak immediately to the evening supervisors. It may be that they need to wait until one song has finished so that they can get to the band. Obviously, we don't want to interrupt a band right in the middle of a song. And then as soon as we've had confirmation back that they've been able to speak to the band, we would then call the person back. So I'd struggle to imagine it'd be 20 minutes. And I don't want to speak for Georgia, but we would just, I don't think Georgia would have said you just have to wait. This doesn't seem to be in keeping with our normal sort of attitude about these sorts of things. And I don't think that is what you would have said.
I think what we're referring to is where it's not necessarily the noise complaint coming in and asking them to turn it down that way. It was a wait that had to, like 11:30, you'll just have to wait. I don't know. If it's a noise complaint, we'll always follow up. So I would never say, because yeah. It wouldn't be.
It would be closer to 5 minutes.
It would be, yeah.
It just 20 minutes feels unfair to say that. 20 minutes seems unfair to say that we would leave people hanging for 20 minutes. Yeah, just the observation to make.
But in your view, you believe it has happened?
I mean, sometimes it can be 10 minutes, but maybe because on that particular night, we had calls, more than one call, you know, because efforts were made to try and turn it down, and it wasn't successful.
Aileen, do you have any questions? No.
One more follow-up. And I hope I'm not opening ourselves up to having an error in our log. And if we are, I very much do apologise. I'm not trying to mislead anyone. But I'm just looking at our noise complaints log that we have. And I actually only have 2 calls from you this year, which was the 31st of May that you mentioned, and then the 8th of July, which we've spoken about, which was the event where the rave was taking place. And the notes that we have with the 31st of July is that you noticed that there was a difference because we had rolled down the sides of the marquee. That was our measure that we took on that night. And of course, you spoke to me on the 8th of July, and I said, we'll call you back, and you said not to, and which was particularly frustrating in a way, because it would have been great to call back and say immediately that wasn't us, but it was, that was the night of the rave. So as I say, I do apologise if our log is wrong, but from our complaints log, I only have those 2, 31st of May, where we rolled the sides down, and then 8th of July, which was not us, but yeah.
Excuse me, but all these incidents could be avoided just by making sure the complaints don't begin at the first place, and then no one's disadvantaged, including yourself.
Right, okay, I will now move on to, and I don't know where I'm on my list, am I with Jane Nicole next? Jane, would you like to add to your representation?
Oh, thank you. Am I on? Yeah, just briefly, I don't want to go over what everybody else has said, but just to reiterate really that it is essentially an outside event. I know you can probably roll the sides down on marquees, but it's so noticeable that it's an outside event. Particularly in the summer when windows are open, the noise can be horrendous. I've got a 16-year-old that's studying, keeps her awake sometimes till 2 o'clock in the morning because she can't get back to sleep. I just ask again that if there could be some kind of objective measurement if the licence is granted for measuring the noise.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions?
No, not for me.
You ask yours.
Yeah. So have you ever complained to your local town council? No, thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Probably obvious, not a question, it's probably obvious what I'm going to say, but I'm just not sure it's fair to say that we're keeping you awake till 2 o'clock in the morning. It's just, oh, sorry.
Sleep and was woken up by the noise and then couldn't get back to sleep, so was potentially still awake at sort of 2 a.m. I don't want to get too bogged down. Jane did explain that. Okay, thank you. Aileen, do you have any questions? Thank you very much. To add to your representation.
Yes, please. Thank you guys for making such a clear point. I hadn't understood a lot of what you said today before. And when I refer to Dean's Court, I mean as a whole, not just you guys, okay? So most of the stuff you've covered, but I'd still like to read what I wrote, if that's okay. Please try and envisage this. Our home has 2 aspects. One overlooks Dean's Court kitchen gardens, meadows, and river beyond, which is quite simply idyllic. The second aspect overlooks Dean's Court driveway, avenue of ancient and beautiful trees leading into the picturesque parkland. These are the exact reasons we chose to buy and live in our home, and we absolutely love it. I'd like to explain that on most summer weekends, we can hear music from the venue through the afternoon till 11 p.m. We can always hear the music. If the wind blows our way, we can hear the lyrics clearly. If we wish to talk or watch the TV at normal level, we literally have to shut the windows and turn up the volumes. I would like to add, though, that normally at 11 p.m. on the dot, we cannot hear the music. It stops, and we know that we can breathe a sigh of relief and throw open the windows and go to bed peacefully, and for that we're thankful. Regarding the sound investigation scheduled to take place, I would like to propose a more thorough sound test is done in the surrounding areas. One person walking down Dean's Court Lane at 11 o'clock will not suffice, largely because most of the buildings down that road are commercial and belong to Dean's Court, so they won't be affected like we are. Also, before 11 o'clock, people may be up watching TV and chatting and getting ready for bed, etc. But after 11, they're going to be going to bed, and shortly after, hopefully, to go to sleep. It's that time after 11, as we've already discussed, that we feel is important to do the sound test. And I know that's difficult when you're not going on past 11, but on the occasions that you go on till 12, maybe you could do the test, I think. It would be good. I'd also like to propose that a proper meter is done for the testing or on the equipment, because actually if you had that red light system, you could breathe easier because you know that it's taken care of. You don't even have to think about it. The light goes on, the music goes quieter. I'm not even saying turn it off. I'm just saying turn it down, please, after that time. I think a compromise could easily be made. And I do invite you or your representatives to come into Queen Elizabeth Court on those evenings to do a test. We haven't had anybody come round. And to be fair, until somebody else told me of the notice of this licence, I had no idea how to contact you. And I haven't made a complaint to the town council because I haven't needed to, because to be fair, at 11, they promptly stop. What I don't want to happen is that it goes on past 11. This is actually the first communication I've had with Dean's Court, and I'm sorry that you felt it was personal that we hadn't had any communication, but historically we have not had communication with Dean's Court, and they've admittedly on the grapevine we've heard that they don't want to speak to us on various issues over the years. It's not just about this. Probably before your time, you guys. So it's a historical thing that we think that they don't want to talk to us. And actually, when I was growing up, I was taught if you're going to have a party, you either invite the neighbours or inform the neighbours. And unfortunately, Dean's Court has never done that for us residents. And I do speak for myself. We have some quite elderly residents that couldn't come here. And I do chat with them. And I know, they feel the same. So that's it, really. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions? No. Yes, of course. Do you have any questions? No. Aileen, do you have any questions? No. Okay. I'll now move on. I do have Scott Randall. I do have you down, but I do actually have you down as not speaking. So I'm happy if you're happy if there's anything that you would like to add.
I just made a couple of observations, if I may, just to add to what Kate said and the other guys have said. I don't want to go back on this meter thing again, but I'll just add another little bit of weight to that. You have a speed limit on a motorway to adhere to rules, and it seems to be that everybody's complaining about noise. And surely we need some form of measurement for noise here. It would make it easier for everybody, unless it's difficult to do. But so on that, complaints, people don't tend to complain. I'll sit there and moan. I can hear the music. I can Shazam your music out of the lounge window, and it picks it up. So it is noisy, but I don't complain, generally. And would I know where to complain to? Noise environment? Environmental agency or something like that? I don't know where you would get that. Noise protection, exactly. You made a couple of comments about general public sort of events. I don't see that bears anything here, because in my experience, weddings are often more riotous and noisy and enjoyable in some ways if you're at the event than a general public thing. So weddings are noisy. We all know that. We've all been to weddings, and especially as they get later. That's it, really. But it is a problem, and it will only get worse if we get later.
May I add just one thing? Georgia, you made reference to the dancing moose and Wetherspoons. And whilst that's absolutely true, they do cause trouble in town, and also we don't like them being that open and that noisy and causing trouble in town, just to let you know.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. I will now move on to Mr. Nicole. Is there anything to be added to the representation for Monica Strachan?
Yes, she asked me to raise a couple of other issues here. One specifically is from Julie Barrett, who's the president of the CIEH, who makes a statement, which is the Environmental Health Professionals Association in England. Noise is not only a source of annoyance, but also has a profound impact on people's health, well-being and quality of life. It has been linked to increasing the risk of cardiovascular disease and potentially other cardiometabolic diseases, including strokes and diabetes. Following on from that, she asked me to also read another statement from Gloria Elliott, OBE, who is the Chief Executive of the Noise Abatement Society. Noise is a major nuisance and pollutant that seriously affects people's health and well-being. The CIEH Noise Survey provides valuable evidence that noise profoundly and adversely impacts our quality of life and productivity. We want to see good acoustic design applied holistically for the benefit of all. She also gave me some other documentation that's been provided actually on a licensing condition from East Dorset District Council for a town hall in Chalbury and Horton, which sits on the periphery of the village. Point number 3, which is quite pertinent to today's discussion, is a noise limiter shall be installed on all inside music, not outside music, inside music, to ensure that the levels to be agreed in writing with environmental health officers are adhered to. Now that's on an inside venue where they also must keep their windows closed all the time to ensure that there's no disturbance to the surrounding neighbours. There's going further afield to Newark and Sherwood District Council. They have produced a very good noise from outdoor events and music advice note, which again stipulates the fact that there should be some form of baseline noise survey and then a follow-up survey done during events over a period of time so that objective measurements can be taken on the noise levels and not left to subjective interpretation. Mrs. Strachan also asked me to mention that she's concerned about the value of properties in the area. Like, as you know, I'm just reading what she asked me to do. That any issues and potential selling of properties must be listed, and she's worried, being an elderly lady, that it could affect her quality of life going forward. Thank you.
Do you have any questions? No. No. Do you have any questions? Aileen, do you have any questions? No.
She hasn't made any complaints to the council either.
These mics. I'm going to go through to summing up, but I do just have a couple of questions to ask the applicant before I move to summing up. Are either of you on site permanently when these events take place, or do you designate to another senior member of staff?
So when the events take place, so for example, every wedding this year, I am on site. However, I do leave in the evening, and I do have evening supervisors who are trained and designated to obviously help with any of the noise disturbances if they so arise. Oh, I mean, I'm very terrible at leaving, so I can be there quite late. And obviously the particularly big ones, the ones that I feel like, you know, the bigger guest numbers and things like that, I am there into the evening as well.
And the staff that you leave there to oversee are fully aware of what your policies are with regards to the noise issues?
Absolutely.
And just one more question. Have you got any explanation as to what happened on Sunday evening?
This is, I think somebody was mentioning about the gatehouse. Yeah, is that right? Well, so first of all, obviously the gatehouse isn't, that was I imagine this is a party, the group that had booked the holiday property. It's a holiday property that's bookable for a 3-night weekend or a 4-night midweek. So they booked it from the Friday to the Monday. They would have checked out today. I mean, I think the person that was speaking about it said that the music went off very promptly at 10 o'clock, and they assumed that there must have been a call and we must have intervened. I didn't mention at the time, but actually when the question came up, but actually it's interesting to note that we did not receive a call about the Gatehouse yesterday. We do have quite aggressive messaging that goes to the guests, both when they do their online check-in and signage throughout the property saying music to be outside, to be off at 10:30, voices to a minimum from 11. So it's actually quite nice and reassuring to know that they seemingly did follow that exact that process. But no, we did not have an event. We were not running an event in the Gatehouse. This is the party that was there that had booked it.
So with regards to the Gatehouse, if it's booked under one of your events, then obviously that would be adhered to by your policies. So I believe that with regards to if it's booked through Airbnb, then it would just be the fact that they would have guidance there when they book.
So, I mean, it's an interesting point, and perhaps licensing could give input on that. I think the way that we interpreted it, and we could, if we're wrong, then we're wrong, but I think the way that we interpreted it was that we wanted the Gatehouse to be included within our premise license if we were to host an event in the Gatehouse. So, for instance, sometimes people might ask, if we can host we've done a product launch before that, or we've done a rebranding, and we do drinks and canapes for guests, and it's a one evening event. But I assumed, and hopefully I'm not wrong, that if it is just booked as a holiday property, then it doesn't fall under our events within, because we're not serving alcohol, or we're not providing entertainment and all that sort of thing. So maybe that's a technical point that we need clarity on.
Aileen.
Thank you, Chair. Licensable activities cover the sale of alcohol. It is the sale from the point of sale. But entertainment is only where it's provided for an audience. So if it took place within a party in the guest house, just as it would in anybody else's house if they had a party, then we don't get involved. It's not a licensable activity. It is only if it's provided for an audience. So it is, yeah.
Can we make sure that we are completely clear? So am I right with that understanding then, if it's booked as a holiday let, so people have booked it for the week, they've brought their own food, they've got their friends and all the rest of it, it doesn't fall under our conditions or our sort of, we don't have to supervise, we don't need to provide door staff and all that sort of thing. It is essentially outside of the premise license. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, yes. It's more to do with a private effect. So it comes from the old Public Entertainment Licensing Act, but I won't bore you with a full history of that.
Let the residents have an idea of how that would work, because obviously you could look at it and go, well, you've got that whole area licensed and they're causing us an issue for you to be told, well, actually, it's got nothing to do with us this weekend because it's a private function. So, yeah.
Look.
That, yeah, anybody that's in touch that premises would do. Aileen.
Just because it's not covered by the licence doesn't mean to say that environmental health can't interact, because there are such things as noise abatement notices. So if there are sufficient complaints, then that would take that down that route rather than through the licence.
I don't want to stray too far from this. Is it something you can add to your summing up? Okay, brilliant.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back on that. So if the residents of the Gatehouse, don't know how many it can hold, decided they wanted to hire in a band, how does that affect the licence? It's because it's on licensed premises.
just waiting to go red. It's a matter of fact and degree in each case. So what we would do is we would look at all the requirements under the Licensing Act, then we'd look at all the exemptions, then we'd look at the circumstances of the event. Theoretically, if there were enough people there and they hired a band, then yes, they could possibly need a licence, but they could also apply for their own or a temporary event notice.
So that's the gatehouse covered. Yeah. Are we sort of clear on that? Okay, thank you. Right. I am now going to move on to summing up. I am going to do summing up in reverse. If you feel as though you have said everything that you have to say, you don't need to add anything to summing up, but I'd just like to give this opportunity for you all to have your final say. So I am going to start with Mr. Nicol, and that is on behalf of Monica Strachan. Do you have anything to add in summing up?
No.
Okay, and thank you very much for attending. I will now go to, even though Scott Randall wasn't speaking, but I did allow him to speak. Do you have anything you would like to add in summing up?
Yes, only that I'd like to say that... Sorry. Whilst they have mentioned that there's no intention of running events sort of 5 days a week or something like that, of course, once this licence is granted, there's nothing to stop them having lots and lots of events. It could go on. It's just you mentioned that it's in policy and your current policy is not to do this, but of course policy is there to be rewritten and you can change your policy. You can change your policy to say, okay, let's have an event till 12 o'clock, 5 days a week. And with the licence granted, they can do that. That's the only thing I'd like to say.
Thank you, and thank you for attending. Kate Randall, do you have anything that you'd like to add to something?
Actually, I forgot to ask a question about, it says here, Monday to Sunday, late night refreshment till 4 o'clock in the morning. May I ask what that might be? Or unless I've read that wrong. Late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, 2300 till 0400. I was just wondering what could possess anybody to need food at that time of the morning. Can you explain what that might pertain to? Okay.
So late night refreshment is required for any food or drink that is above ambient temperature that is served to people. So it could be something as simple as a cup of coffee. But you probably want to go to the applicant to ask why they have specifically requested that one.
I just wanted to double check that it's slightly embarrassingly, I do want to double check that we actually did do that. And I can see Eileen sort of rummaging through her papers as well. Sorry.
I can clarify this. It's not actually applied for. Late night refreshment is only applied to midnight from 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, so I'd just like to ask that you don't allow this late licence to go ahead because I don't want to have to think about moving house again. And I fear that if the music goes on past 11, then it really would make a difference to our life. And I don't really want it to. That's all.
Thank you, and again, thank you very much for attending. I now go on to Jane Nicol. Do you have anything you'd like to add for your summing up?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Scott Randall said, really, that although it's not your policy moving forward that you're going to have events 7 days a week, if you did, it would be absolutely horrific. And if the licence is granted, there's nothing to stop that happening. Daughter's about to start studying for A-levels. I think we would probably have to think about moving as well if that licence were granted and events took place, potentially every night of the week. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for attending. I have now got Stephen and Catherine Hughes. Is there anything that you would like to add to your summing up?
Not really, thanks. Just to amplify the those comments I made further, for consideration in the conditions of the licence that some measurement is made available after a survey and adhered to by some digital control at the venue. That's it for me, thank you.
And I'd like to ask that from what Georgia and Jonathan said earlier, that if you are going to grant this licence, you consider varying it to say that it's only till midnight on Friday and Saturday evening. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for attending. I will now move on.
Can I be excused to go and pay for my car parking?
Gentlemen can... Yes, have you got anything that you'd like to add to summing up? No, that's it. Okay, that's fine. Right, I've got Julia Herbert. Julia, have you got anything that you would like to add to summing up?
The only thing I'd really like to say is that everyone here are immediate neighbours to Dean's Court. We literally back onto it. Some people 20 feet away. I was surprised to hear that the marquee raises the edges up, because that means the sound is coming immediately out. There is hardly any barrier to stop the noise anyway. So that is my main concern, is that it's for everyone around. We're just representing, we're two in a neighbourhood of 16 properties, so, and they all are affected by it.
Thank you, and thank you for attending. Mr. Dovey, have you got anything you'd like to add to summing up?
Yes, please. In summary, I believe, and I use the word I believe, we've established that no noise measurements have been taken and that there is no formal risk assessment has been done by Dean's Court Estate. In which case, therefore, how can you monitor the level of nuisance being caused at higher frequencies and lower frequencies? You need measurement. At the moment, it's incumbent on a lot of the residents, if there is nuisance caused, like last night, albeit the gatehouse, and that was on a private licence potentially, we have to phone up the hotline to actually get Georgia and Jonathan out of bed, which we've been loath to do because we like to have a positive working relationship with them in town. And, you know, phoning somebody up and hanging around at midnight for about 20 minutes when you're tired as well. I didn't get to bed till 2 o'clock last night because of the noise that had been caused at the gatehouse, and that didn't stop till 10:30, 11:15. And by the time I'd wound down ahead of coming to this meeting here, I didn't get off to sleep till 2 o'clock. There are other residents there in Millstream Close who have young children staying with them, and when they've got the windows open at night, they find it very, very difficult to get to sleep. In my bedroom upstairs, I've even got a second, in addition to the double glazing, I've got a secondary pane of glazing which goes across it. We live in town, and at the end of the day, there are a lot of residences around there, and as far as I'm concerned, it's live and let live. But this is one bridge too far. They're pushing the commercial envelope even further. It's forcing us to have to come on a formal route to gum up things via yourself. And just because you haven't seen it with environmental health and other people haven't voiced it, it doesn't mean that it hasn't happened. I've lived there for 25 years, and what's really come about informally with Jonathan has been a direct result of our input over the years to try and address this matter. They're trying to push the commercial envelope at our expense, and it's wrong. We have, in law, a right to quiet enjoyment between 11 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night and 7 o'clock the next morning. We turn a blind eye to a lot of things because it's live and let live, and we live in the heart of a town. But we are human beings, and we don't want to be forced out to actually be forced to live somewhere else. I've been there 25 years, 27 years in the Close. And one final thing, you know, it makes me rather emotional, but this is a form of nuisance. It is a form of pollution, and we're basically Profits have to be made by the estate, but not at the expense of our health and well-being and also at our property prices. We have a right to live there as well and coexist with the estate. But this is one bridge too far. And this thing that they can't measure it, that's absolute poppycock. It can be done. I've done it in the past, and we need to get that out and sort it out. But it's the last thing we wanted to do is to come via the council and gum up the council work and the environmental health officer. We know you've got better things to do. But last night's a classic example, the Gatehouse. They get out of that by granting personal licenses. But a lot of the people who attend the weddings are actually renting the guest house as well. And so once they've finished at the Gatehouse, going into the future, and they roll back at, say, 12:30, 1 o'clock, there can be ongoing noise and nuisance in the hot tub at the back, loud conversations, drunken laughter, etc., that will go on to 1:30. And where are Jonathan and Georgina? They've got to get a good night's sleep, but they're half an hour away. And the only person on site is the supervisors, who don't really know what they're doing. We don't have a relationship. And the only other person on site is William Hannam, who never gets out of his bed to actually come and work out what's going on. And he's only 100 yards down the road. It falls on these two to have to sort it out. It's absolutely outrageous. With that, I'll finish.
Thank you very much, and thank you for attending. I think I've covered everybody that made representation with their summing up. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I will now move on to the applicant. Do you have anything to add in summing up, please?
Yes, please. And forgive us, we haven't written a sort of a summing up, so we'll just have to, and I want to sort of pick up on some of those summing ups there. I think I suspect a lot of the thoughts coming into this were obviously made prior to us giving our speech. So understandably, there is some things a little bit at odds with what we explained in our speech versus what we're hearing, which is understandable. But I just wanted to reiterate that we really are planning no material change to what has been seen already over the past few years. So, for instance, somebody saying, now all of a sudden we might want to run events every night of the week. Well, our license already allows us to run events every night of the week, and it has done since the beginning of the license, and we've never wanted to do it. And so this license wouldn't even design to change that anyway. If we wanted to run weddings 7 nights a week and absolutely kill Georgia, and she would be absolutely exhausted from it all, that would be something we're already doing. It's not. There really is no plans to change. In terms of more events going on till midnight, well, we've never maxed out the number of temporary event notices that we're allowed. So in terms of that market, if you like, for brides and grooms that want to go on until midnight, well, we've never actually needed to do more than the intents would allow anyway. So there's no reason why there should suddenly be any more. And again, we've put in the in-house policies, which granted are difficult to condition into the license, but that shows how much we don't want to be doing them either. We just want it to be available for couples who otherwise wouldn't book us. So as we've seen, a good handful of times a year it would happen, and that's what we're expecting. We've already mentioned in our speech, but happy for this, to be sort of clarified. If it, helps to ease things, we certainly are more than happy with midnight on Fridays and Saturdays only, plus the 30 minutes for the alcohol, and therefore leaving it as is Sunday to Thursday just till 11. And so, that hopefully again should explain we're really not trying to go midnight 7 nights a week, 365 a year. I hope I've sort of been quite clear about our view, which is based on education from environmental health around the decibel meter readings. As I've said, and I think you and I agree, Chair, that it's far more complicated, and it seems like an absolute solution to just set a digital number and sit back, relax, and forget it. But it just doesn't work that way, as is my understanding from environmental health. Now, I know that's been brought up a few times, so perhaps if there was a compromise there, what we might be able to say is perhaps a condition could be something along the lines of a noise plan to be agreed with, a noise management plan to be agreed with environmental health, which we do already have in place. And therefore, if environmental health felt that that was an appropriate condition or an appropriate policy or an appropriate way forward, they could then agree that within a noise management plan, rather than us popping one on as a condition and being in this awkward situation where we can't really sort of do it. Environmental health don't really want to enforce it. They know it's complicated and doesn't achieve the result. But if it was a compromise, then at least that would be some way that it's, you know, as I say, the noise management plan to be agreed with environmental health, and then they could decide if they wanted to have that to be part of it. I think somebody mentioned that, you know, the onus is on them and they don't want to call or disturb Georgia or I at the point of disturbance, which, you know, is only going to be up until midnight. And I say only up until midnight. Georgia and I, you know, will likely be awake. Georgia's probably checking in with the team anyway and all that sort of thing. But I can understand they may not feel that they want to call. But as we've said at every meeting that we've had, even if you don't feel like calling on the night, we've always said you can always email. You can always call us the next day, call us the next working day, email us the next working day, and we'll always add it to our log. So it's not the case that we only want to hear, or we've only said that we'll take calls when it's happening and nothing else matters. We've always said that, the best thing for us is to keep a log and records of how we're doing. And so it's not just as simple as saying, well, we didn't want to call at night, therefore we never called. There was always the chance to call if it was particularly bad or felt they needed to the following day or send an email or what have you. And then finally, just in terms of people, the view that if we were granted this license, and again, we did openly say in our speech, we realize it looks like a very broad, all-encompassing license, and it's really a kind of a take our word for it that we're not planning on changing things materially. But as we've said, if that did, for some reason, it's not like this is it forever. You know, licenses can always be reviewed, and if ever we've been found to be unreasonable, even if within the bounds of the license, if things are causing problems, you know, this is what licensing is there for, to review it. So we hope that, I mean, you're probably aware of all these things anyway, but I just wanted to kind of make that clear that no material change. We've never maxed out our 10s. We could already host 7 days a week if we wanted to, but obviously we don't. Please think carefully about that acoustic decibels, because we you know, I talked about that. And yeah, if we fall foul, we can always review.
Thank you very much. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, John covered both of our points.
Thank you. And again, thank you both for attending. Aileen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Just to remind you that you must be proportionate and appropriate with any licence as you're considering, as you well know. And you must also take account, I'm afraid, of the fact that EH have not made a representation, as they are your experts in this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you for obviously your patience and your time this morning. That's now run on into the afternoon. I'll take a vote on exempt business, but before I do that, we will go into exempt business to make our decision. Once we've made our decision, then our decision will be sent out to you. Once you've received a copy of the full decision notice, which would be within 5 working days, then obviously after you've received the full decision notice, there is a right to appeal to Weymouth Magistrates Court, and that is within 21 days of receiving the decision notice.
Sorry, Chair, I don't like to correct you, but it would be Poole Magistrates in this instance.
Of course it would. So, you have the right to appeal to Poole Magistrates Court, not Weymouth. Okay, again, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and now can I take a vote that we go into exempt business to make our decision?
Happy to propose it, Chair.
Okay, in our exempt business, we do have our legal advisor on hand should we need any legal advice. Thanks again for attending.
Thank you.